The shadows of Hades 9 station stretched long across the docking bay, casting the rusted metal walls in amber hues as artificial lighting compensated for the perpetual night of deep space. Cale Torvin adjusted the collar of his worn leather jacket, feeling the familiar weight of salvage tools in his pockets as he made his way toward Hangar 17. The air held that unmistakable mix of engine oil, recycled oxygen, and the faint tang of illicit spice that permeated every corner of the station, hovering at the edge of the Veros asteroid belt. 20 years after the Void War had torn apart interstellar civilizations, places like Hades 9 thrived on the margins, catering to those who made their living from the remnants of conflict. Salvagers, smugglers, and black market merchants all found their niche in the chaotic ecosystem of the station. Cale had carved out his own reputation among them, the engineer who could resurrect ships that others deemed beyond salvation. Tonight, however, he wasn't here to fix someone else's vessel. He was here to gamble on his own future. The midnight auction was already underway when Cale slipped through the doorway of the repurposed cargo hold. The room buzzed with murmurs as traders and corporate representatives assessed the offerings with calculating eyes. Dim lighting cast everything in a conspiratorial glow, punctuated by the rotating holographic displays of various lots. Cale's attention immediately fixed on Lot 17. The hologram showed a ship unlike any he'd seen before. Its hull bore an unusual organic quality, covered in what appeared to be a biomechanical membrane, with subtle, almost vein-like patterns flowing beneath a pearlescent exterior. The form was sleek but alien, neither conforming to human nor known xeno-design principles. "Useless junk," muttered a voice to Cale's right. He turned to see a tall figure in an immaculate corporate uniform. Darius Kane, representative of Helios Dynamics, wore the cold expression of a military tech hunter who'd already categorized and dismissed the lot before him. His augmented eyes barely registered Cale as they swept across the room, assessing other potential acquisitions. "Lot 17, announced the auctioneer, a squat man with cybernetic vocal enhancements. "Salvaged from the outer Veros region. Origins unknown. Likely abandoned during the later stages of the Void War. Power systems unresponsive but structure intact. Opening bid at 5,000 credits." The room remained silent. Even the most desperate salvagers seemed hesitant. 4,000 then," the auctioneer adjusted, voice betraying mild annoyance. A hand raised near the back. 4,000? Another voice. 5,000. Cale watched as the bidding crawled upward with obvious reluctance. At 12,000 credits, the room fell silent again. The auctioneer prepared to close the bidding when Cale surprised himself. 15,000, he called out. Heads turned. Cale's reputation meant people knew he rarely bid without reason. Darius Kane's augmented eyes narrowed slightly, reassessing both the lot and Cale in the same calculated glance. 15,000 from Torvin, the auctioneer acknowledged. "Do I hear 17? 17, came Kane's smooth voice. The next few minutes became a blur as Cale found himself locked in a bidding war that strained the limits of his finances. Every rational part of his mind screamed to stop, but something about Lot 17 called to him. When the bidding reached 40,000 credits, every last credit Cale could muster by mortgaging his workshop and depleting his savings, Darius Kane unexpectedly withdrew with a dismissive wave. "Sold to Cale Torvin for 40,000 credits, the auctioneer announced, sounding genuinely surprised. As Cale moved to complete the transaction, he caught Kane speaking quietly into a comm unit. The corporate representative's face revealed nothing, but Cale couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just become entangled in something far more complex than a simple auction. 3 hours later, Cale guided Lot 17 into his private docking berth at the far end of Hades 9. The dock workers eyed the strange vessel with suspicious glances, their expressions shifting from curiosity to unease as the ship's pearlescent hull changed colors under the harsh dock lights. "What the hell did you buy this time?" "Torvin," asked Mira. the night shift supervisor, her dark eyes scanning the unusual contours of the vessel. "Just another project," Cale replied, forcing casualness into his voice despite the knot of anxiety in his stomach. He'd just spent every credit to his name on this gamble. When the docking procedures were complete and the workers had left, Cale approached the ship with a portable diagnostic kit. Up close, the hull was even more fascinating. The surface felt warm to the touch, and the biomechanical membrane pulsed slightly, like the surface of something not quite asleep. The main access hatch was sealed tight, refusing to respond to standard override protocols. Cale worked his way around the hull, searching for any entry point. After an hour of careful exploration, he found a maintenance panel that yielded to his touch. The panel slid open with an organic fluidity that no mechanical door could mimic. Inside, the ship was dark except for faint, bioluminescent traces along what appeared to be neural pathways in the walls. The control console displayed a series of symbols, unlike any language or code Cale had encountered in his years of salvage work. When he attempted to interface with the system using standard protocols, the console remained dormant. Biometric seals throughout the ship rejected his fingerprints and DNA samples. Cale pressed deeper into the vessel, making his way toward the engine room. Even powered down, the propulsion system retained traces of energy, with occasional flickers of light pulsing through conduits that resembled arteries more than wiring. Self-repair circuits appeared to function like living systems, subtly adjusting and reconfiguring as he observed them. After hours of exploration, Cale detected a faint signal emanating from the deepest part of the ship. Following it through a maze of corridors, he discovered a hidden access panel beneath a tangle of what looked like dormant cables. The panel responded to his touch, revealing a narrow passage that led further inward. What Cale found at the end of the passage left him breathless. A vast chamber opened before him, filled with what could only be described as biomechanical weaponry. The walls seemed to flex and curve as he entered, responding to his presence like a sleeping organism reacting to stimulus. But it was the central feature that froze him in place. A cylindrical biochamber dominated the room, filled with pale blue liquid that cast ethereal light across the chamber. Suspended within it was a woman, or at least a humanoid female form. Her skin was a deep azure, her hair a striking crimson that floated around her face like flames underwater. Her eyes were closed, but her features were delicate and otherworldly, with subtle ridges along her temples and cheekbones that marked her as definitely non-human. "Holy stars," Cale whispered, approaching the chamber with cautious steps. His diagnostic tools indicated the chamber was a sophisticated stasis unit, designed to preserve its occupant indefinitely. Status indicators showed minimal but steady power flow, maintaining essential life functions. On impulse, Cale redirected power from his portable unit to boost the chamber's systems. The response was immediate. Warning lights flashed, and the liquid within the chamber began to drain. The woman's body lowered gently to the bottom of the container as protective seals released with hissing sounds. Cale stepped back, suddenly uncertain about what he'd initiated. As the last of the fluid drained away, the front panel of the chamber slid open. The woman's eyes snapped open, amber irises with vertical pupils that contracted sharply in the chamber's light. She gasped, drawing her first breath outside stasis in what Cale would later learn had been nearly 60 years. Her first words were in a language Cale couldn't understand, melodic and complex, with tonal shifts that human vocal cords would struggle to reproduce. She staggered forward, catching herself on the edge of the chamber, eyes wild with confusion. Cale raised his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, speaking slowly. "My name is Cale Torvin. I think I just bought your ship." The woman tilted her head, studying him with those remarkable amber eyes. After a moment, her lips moved again, this time producing sounds closer to common standard. "You human?" she asked, her voice accented but intelligible. "Yes," Kale confirmed. "Human. And you are?" She straightened herself with visible effort, a flash of pride crossing her features. "I am Arya Luxon, Time Countess of the Ethereal Flotillas." Her voice grew stronger with each word as her language centers adapted. "Where is my fleet? How long have I slept?" Kale's heart sank as the implications hit him. Ethereal. One of the advanced civilizations devastated in the Void War. If she was truly ethereal, then she was possibly the last of her kind, awakening to find her entire civilization reduced to dust and memory. "I think," he said gently, "we have a lot to talk about." The next 3 days aboard what Arya called the Void Whisper became a delicate dance of mutual discovery and growing unease. Kale had moved his essential belongings onto the ship, partly to study it more closely, and partly because he could no longer afford his station quarters after emptying his accounts for the auction. Arya's initial shock had given way to a quiet dignity that Kale found himself admiring. She moved through the ship with the grace of someone returning home after a long absence, her slender fingers tracing familiar patterns on control surfaces that responded to her touch in ways they never had to Kale's. "The binding protocols recognize me," she explained, demonstrating how the ship's systems came to life under her command. "Void Whisper is not merely a vessel. It is a living extension of ethereal consciousness." "So it's actually alive?" Kale asked, watching in fascination as the walls pulsed with increased bioluminescence in Arya's presence. "Not alive as you understand it," she corrected, "but not merely mechanical either. Our technology evolved alongside us, forming a symbiotic relationship. The ship feels, remembers, and adapts." As Arya gradually regained her strength, she began teaching Kale about ethereal principles, how to sense what she called soul fire, the cosmic energy that flowed through all living things, and how ethereal technology harnessed this energy to achieve what humans would consider impossible feats of engineering. In return, Kale helped Arya understand the current state of the galaxy. He taught her about post-war protocols, station security measures, and the everyday technologies humans took for granted. Each lesson was a knife in his heart as he watched her process the confirmation that her civilization had indeed been destroyed. "So it is true," she said one evening, gazing out a viewport at the distant stars. "The ethereal are gone. All our cities, our gardens, our libraries of living knowledge." "Not all," Kale said, gesturing to the ship around them. "This survived. You survived." She turned to him, amber eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "One ship and one countess. A poor foundation upon which to rebuild a civilization." "Better than nothing," Kale insisted. "And you're not alone anymore." The look she gave him then, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper he couldn't quite name, made his heart race in a way that had nothing to do with the technical marvels surrounding them. Their tentative peace was shattered the following day when Kale received an encrypted message from his old friend, Jax Marrow. "Helios is asking questions about your purchase," Jax warned, his weathered face filling the comm screen. "Offering serious credits for information about unusual features on your new acquisition. Be careful, Kale. They don't make offers like that unless they think you've got something worth taking." Kale's suspicions from the auction were confirmed. Darius Kane hadn't withdrawn from the bidding out of disinterest. Somehow, Helios Dynamics knew or suspected what the Void Whisper contained, and they wanted Arya. When he shared this information with her, Arya's response was not fear, but a cold anger that transformed her features. "They would treat me as cargo?" she asked, her voice dangerously soft. "As technology to be dismantled and studied?" "That's what corporations like Helios do," Kale explained. "They strip mine the past for anything they can weaponize or monetize, and an actual living ethereal with knowledge of your civilization's technology. You'd be the find of the century." We should leave, Arya decided. The ship has enough power for basic functions. If we can clear the station's jurisdiction, they'll be watching for that, Kale countered. We need supplies, fuel cells, and a plan before we attempt to break out. Give me 2 days. Those 2 days became a frantic preparation for escape. Kale called in favors, bartered his technical services, and acquired the essentials they would need. Arya, meanwhile, worked to awaken more of the Void Whisper's dormant systems, pushing herself to the limits of exhaustion each day. You need to rest, Kale insisted on the second night, finding her slumped over a neural interface console. Time is luxury we do not have, she responded, though she allowed him to guide her to a resting chamber. The ship remembers its purpose. Kale. It was not merely a transport. Void Whisper was a warship, one of the last defenders of our homeworld. All the more reason to preserve your strength, he argued. If Helios comes for us, we'll need every advantage. As if summoned by his words, the ship's proximity sensors flared to life. 6 armed figures were approaching their docking bay, their movements synchronized and purposeful. They're here, Arya whispered, suddenly alert. Sooner than we anticipated. The maintenance tunnels, Kale decided instantly. We can reach the ship through the external access port. They'll expect us to come through the main concourse. As they hurried through the station's grimy underbelly, Kale's mind raced. They weren't ready. The ship had fuel, but not enough for a proper escape. They had supplies, but hadn't secured them aboard. Everything was falling apart before it had even begun. They reached the external access hatch, just as alarm klaxons began to sound throughout the station. Through a viewport, Kale could see figures in Helios Dynamics uniforms surrounding the Void Whisper, scanning equipment in hand. They're trying to breach the hull, Arya observed, her voice tight. The ship will resist, but not indefinitely. Then we need a diversion, Kale said, pulling a remote detonator from his pocket. Nothing lethal, but the maintenance bay 2 sections over has some volatile components that would create a very impressive light show if they happen to ignite. The resulting explosion was indeed impressive, drawing most of the Helios team away from the ship. In the confusion, Kale and Arya slipped aboard through the maintenance hatch, sealing it behind them. Initiate launch sequence, Arya commanded, as soon as they reached the bridge, her hands dancing across the bio-neural interfaces. We don't have clearance, Kale reminded her, strapping himself into the co-pilot's seat. Arya's lips curved in a grim smile. Void Whisper does not require clearance. The ship came alive around them, systems illuminating in patterns Kale still couldn't decipher. The biomechanical membrane covering the hull rippled and tightened, preparing for the stresses of space travel. Docking clamps released, not by station command, but seemingly by the ship's own intervention in the station systems. As they pulled away from Hades 9, alarms blared across every channel. Unauthorized departure, vessel in Dock 17. Return immediately or face defensive measures. Can they stop us? Kale asked, watching as the station's defensive turrets began to track their movement. They can try, Arya replied, her concentration absolute as she communed with the ship. The first warning shots flashed past their bow. The next salvo would be aimed to disable. Before Kale could voice his concern, the Void Whisper responded, not with conventional evasive maneuvers, but with a sudden shift in its very structure. The hull flowed like liquid metal, altering the ship's profile and signature, even as it maintained course. What the? Kale gasped. Adaptive camouflage, Arya explained without breaking her focus. A defensive measure. The station's targeting systems lost lock, confused by the shifting parameters of their target. By the time they compensated, the Void Whisper had accelerated beyond effective weapons range, slipping into the protective shroud of the Varos asteroid belt. Only then did Arya relax her posture, turning to Kale with tired but triumphant eyes. We are free of immediate danger, but they will pursue. Then we need a better plan than just running, Kale said, bringing up navigation charts. We need allies, or at least a safe haven to complete the ship's restoration. The Kepler outpost, Arya suggested, studying the charts. It is remote enough to offer concealment, yet close enough to reach with our current power reserves. As they plotted their course through the asteroid belt, Kale couldn't help but wonder at the bizarre turn his life had taken. 1 week ago, he had been a moderately successful salvage engineer with modest ambitions. Now he was a fugitive, fleeing corporate mercenaries alongside the last survivor of an ancient civilization, aboard a living warship he didn't fully understand. Yet despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, he felt more alive than he had in years. The void. Whisper slipped silently between massive asteroids, its adaptive hull occasionally reflecting the distant light of stars in patterns that seemed almost deliberately beautiful. In the co-pilot seat, Kale watched Arya's profile as she guided the ship with subtle gestures and unspoken commands. The soft bioluminescence of the control interfaces cast her azure skin in ethereal light, highlighting the delicate ridges along her cheekbones. "You're staring," she observed without turning her head. Kale cleared his throat, embarrassed. "Sorry, it's just the way you interface with the ship. It's unlike anything I've seen." A small smile played at the corners of her lips. "The connection is deeper than interface. In your terms, perhaps communion would be more accurate." "Can you teach me?" he asked impulsively. This time, she did turn, amber eyes studying him with curiosity. "You wish to learn ethereal communion? Few non-ethereals have ever attempted such a thing." "Few non-ethereals have ever had the chance," Kale pointed out. "Besides, if something happens to you, someone should be able to pilot this ship." The logic was sound, but they both recognized it as partial truth. Something more was developing between them, a connection neither had anticipated, but which grew stronger with each passing day. The journey to Kepler Station took 4 days, during which Arya began Kale's education in ethereal principles. The process was both exhilarating and humbling. Kale, used to mastering complex engineering challenges, found himself struggling with concepts that Arya considered elementary. "You must feel the soul fire," she instructed, guiding his hands over a neural interface. "Not through your fingers, but through your essence." "My essence doesn't seem to be cooperating," Kale grumbled after another failed attempt. Arya surprised him by laughing, a melodic sound he hadn't heard from her before. "You are trying too hard to understand. Some things must be experienced before they can be comprehended." She placed her hand over his, her azure skin contrasting with his sun-darkened tone. "Close your eyes. Breathe as I taught you." Kale complied, focusing on the rhythmic breathing pattern she had demonstrated. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, just as he was about to give up, he felt it, a whisper of something vast and ancient, brushing against his consciousness like the faintest breeze. His eyes snapped open in shock. "What was that?" Arya's smile widened. That, Kale Torvin, was the first touch of soulfire. The ship recognized you, if only for a moment. The triumph of that small connection carried them through the rest of the journey, creating a bond that transcended their differences. By the time they reached the outer periphery of the Kepler mining operation, Kale could initiate basic communications with the ship's systems, clumsy by Arya's standards, but remarkable for a human with no prior exposure to ethereal technology. Kepler Station itself was less a station than a collection of interconnected mining platforms, anchored to a resource-rich asteroid. Once a thriving industrial operation, it had been abandoned after the war, when more lucrative opportunities emerged elsewhere. Now it housed only a skeleton crew of independent miners and the occasional passing trader. Perfect for their needs. They docked at an isolated platform, using Kale's old salvage credentials to avoid uncomfortable questions. The station manager, a grizzled woman named Talia with more mechanical parts than original limbs, recognized Kale from previous salvage runs. "Unusual vessel you've got there, Torvin," she commented, eyeing the Void Whisper's organic contours. "Custom job?" "Something like that," Kale replied vaguely. "Need some quiet time to complete the modifications. Any chance we could use the old refining bay? Happy to pay for power usage." Talia named a price that was reasonable by frontier standards, and they secured a secluded work area where the Void Whisper could undergo its restoration without prying eyes. For 2 weeks, they worked in relative peace. Arya guided the ship's self-repair systems, while Kale handled the integration of standard components, where the original ethereal technology was beyond recovery. They fell into a comfortable routine, their disparate skills complementing each other in ways neither had expected. During rest periods, they exchanged stories, Kale of his years in the civilian patrol before turning to salvage work, Arya of the glorious days of the ethereal flotillas before the Void War. Each narrative filled gaps in the other's understanding, creating a shared history that bridged their different origins. The Gardens of Lyra Prime. Arya described one evening, her voice soft with remembrance. Floating islands of crystal and living metal, with vegetation that sang as the solar winds passed through. From the observation decks, you could watch the aurora dance across 3 different moons simultaneously. "It sounds beautiful," Kale said, trying to imagine such wonders. "It was—" Her amber eyes darkened with sorrow. "And now it exists only in my memory." Without thinking, Kale reached out, covering her hand with his. "Then we'll make sure those memories aren't lost." The moment hung between them, fragile and charged with unspoken emotions. Arya turned her hand beneath his, intertwining their fingers in silent acknowledgement of whatever was growing between them. The peace they had found at Kepler Station shattered the next day, when Jax's urgent transmission broke through their communications blackout. "They found you, Kale," his friend warned. "Transmission breaking up due to deliberate interference. Helios has a hunter fleet hiding in the Kepler belt. At least 6 interceptors and 2 heavy cruisers. They know exactly where you are." The transmission cut off abruptly. Kale and Arya exchanged grim looks. "How long do we have?" she asked, already moving toward the ship. "Hours at most," Kale estimated. "We need to finish the final connections and get the Void Whisper combat ready." "The restoration is only 60% complete," Arya reminded him. "The weapon systems are still dormant." "Then we wake them up," Kale said with more confidence than he felt. "You've been teaching me about soulfire. Time to put those lessons to use." The next several hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Arya pushed herself to the limits, connecting directly with the ship's deepest systems to accelerate the restoration of the ethereal combat configuration. Kale, meanwhile, worked with Talia and a few trusted station engineers to reinforce the hull sections that remained vulnerable. "Whatever you did to piss off Helios, I don't want to know," Talia said as she helped install the last of the improvised shield generators. "But those corporate vultures have been circling independent operators for too long. Consider this my contribution to the cause." By the time their sensors detected the approaching Helios fleet, the Void Whisper was as ready as they could make it, a hybrid of ancient ethereal technology and modern human engineering, beautiful in its asymmetry. "They're deploying in a standard containment pattern," Kale observed, studying the tactical display. 2 heavy cruisers at the exit vectors, interceptors forming a perimeter. They're not taking any chances. "They expect us to run," Arya noted, her hands moving across the neural interfaces with practiced precision. "We should disappoint them." Kale looked at her sharply. "You want to fight? Against those odds?" "The Void Whisper was designed to face worse," she replied with a confidence that sent a chill down Kale's spine. "Besides, we need only disable enough of their forces to create an escape route." Before Kale could argue further, a communication request flashed across their console. After a moment's hesitation, he accepted it. The face that appeared on the screen sent a shock of recognition through him. Not Darius Kane as he'd expected, but Victor Rhee, Kale's former commanding officer from his days in the civilian patrol, now wearing the insignia of Helios Dynamics. Kale Torvin, Victor greeted him with false warmth. It's been a long time. Not long enough, Kale replied coldly. Trading in your patrol badge for corporate credits. Victor, always knew you had a price. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. We all make our choices. Speaking of which, you have something that belongs to Helios Dynamics. I bought the ship legally, Kale countered. Paid for it in full. The ship is inconsequential, Victor dismissed with a wave. It's the cargo we're interested in, the female ethereal. Hand her over, and you can keep your precious salvage. Beside him, Kale felt Arya stiffen. I am not cargo, she said, stepping into view of the communication array. I am Arya Luxon, Time Countess of the Ethereal Flotillas, and this ship is as much a part of me as I am of it. Victor's expression hardened. An impressive speech from an impressive specimen. But the fact remains, you're the property of Helios Dynamics now. The only question is whether Torvin gives you up willingly, or we take you by force. We're done here, Kale said, reaching for the communications control. Think carefully, Torvin, Victor warned. You have 1 hour to surrender the ethereal. After that, we take her, and whether you survive the process is entirely up to you. The screen went dark. Kale turned to Arya, whose amber eyes now blazed with fury. Property, she repeated, the word like poison on her tongue. Is that all your kind sees when they look at mine? Resources to be exploited? Not all humans, Kale said quietly. Just the worst of us. Her expression softened slightly. No, not all humans. She placed her hand on his arm. We have 1 hour to prepare our response. I suggest we make it memorable. Their strategy was both desperate and ingenious. Using the dense asteroid field to their advantage, they plotted a course that would force the larger Helios ships to navigate treacherous terrain while giving the Void Whisper's superior maneuverability maximum impact. The ship's adaptive hull will mask our signature until the last possible moment, Arya explained as they finalized the plan. When we emerge here, she indicated a particularly dense cluster of asteroids. We'll have approximately 3 seconds before their targeting systems lock on. And 3 seconds is enough? Kale asked skeptically. Arya's smile was fierce. For what I have planned, more than enough. Exactly 58 minutes after Victor's ultimatum. The Void Whisper detached from Kepler Station and slipped silently into the asteroid field. The ship moved with preternatural grace, its hull shifting and adapting to minimize detection as they navigated the chaotic environment. In the co-pilot seat, Kale monitored the positions of the Helios fleet. Interceptors adjusting course. They've detected movement but haven't pinpointed us yet. Arya didn't respond verbally, her concentration absolute as she communed with the ship. Under her guidance, the Void Whisper accelerated through a narrow gap between 2 massive asteroids, emerging precisely at the coordinates they'd selected. Contact in 3, 2, 1. The moment they cleared the asteroid field, alarms blared as multiple targeting systems locked onto their position. The heavy cruisers moved to cut off their escape routes, while interceptors closed in from all sides. Now! Arya! Kale shouted, as the first salvo of warning shots streaked past their bow. Arya's eyes closed in deep concentration. Her hands splayed across the neural interface. Ethereal combat configuration, she commanded, her voice resonating with power. Awaken! The Void. Whisper responded with a transformation that left Kale breathless. The hull plates shifted and flowed, unfolding like metallic petals to reveal weapons emplacements that had been dormant since before Kale was born. Bioluminescent patterns flared across the ship's surface, pulsing with concentrated energy. Targeting the lead cruiser, Arya announced, her voice strained with effort. Plasma cannons at 40% capacity. Twin beams of blinding energy erupted from the newly revealed weapons, striking the Helios cruiser with pinpoint accuracy. The larger ship's shields flared and buckled under the assault. Emergency protocols visible as sections of the vessel went dark to reroute power. Second cruiser launching missiles, Kale warned, watching the tactical display with growing alarm. Evasive pattern, Lyra, Arya commanded. The Void. Whisper responded instantly, executing a series of maneuvers that should have been physically impossible, twisting and flowing through space as though the normal laws of inertia didn't apply. The missiles streaked harmlessly past, detonating against the asteroids behind them. For several minutes, the battle continued in this fashion. The Void Whisper dancing between enemy vessels, striking with precision when opportunities presented themselves. But Kale could see that Arya was weakening. The strain of channeling so much energy through the soul-fire connection was taking its toll. "We need to end this quickly," he said, reaching for her hand on the interface. "You can't maintain this level of communion much longer." Arya's amber eyes met his, determination warring with exhaustion. "One final strike," she agreed. "But I will need your strength as well. Join with me in the communion." Kale hesitated only for a heartbeat before placing his hands alongside hers on the neural interface. Immediately, he felt the now familiar touch of soul fire, but amplified beyond anything he had experienced in their practice sessions. The ship's consciousness enveloped his, ancient and powerful, guided by Arya's expert touch. "Focus on the flagship," Arya instructed, her voice seeming to come from both beside him and within his mind simultaneously. "Channel your intent through the soul fire." Kale concentrated, visualizing the second Helios cruiser, the one carrying Victor Ree. He felt something vast and powerful respond to their combined will, energy building within the Void Whisper's core systems. "Now!" Arya commanded. The ship's primary weapon, a spinal-mounted cosmic resonance cannon, discharged with a silent flash that momentarily outshone the nearest stars. A ripple of distorted space-time connected the Void Whisper to the Helios flagship for a fraction of a second before the larger vessel's midsection simply ceased to exist, upper and lower halves drifting apart in the vacuum. The effect on the remaining Helios forces was immediate. With both heavy cruisers disabled and their command structure in chaos, the interceptors broke formation, some retreating while others maneuvered aimlessly without central coordination. Victory should have brought elation. But Kale felt only horror as Arya collapsed beside him, her azure skin paling to a sickly blue-gray. The connection to the ship had drained her almost completely. "Arya!" he cried, gathering her limp form in his arms. "Stay with me!" Her amber eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with effort. "The cosmic resonance takes its toll," she whispered. "Worth it, to be free." "You're not dying on me," Kale insisted, carrying her toward the medical bay. "Not now. Not after everything we've survived." The Void Whisper, responding to their distress, plotted a course back to Kepler Station without further input. Emergency protocols activated the ship's healing systems, ancient ethereal technology designed to replenish depleted life force. For 3 days, Kale barely left Arya's side as she floated in a rejuvenation chamber, not unlike the stasis pod he had found her in. The pale blue healing medium surrounded her, infusing her cells with carefully calibrated energy to replace what she had expended in the battle. On the 4th day, her eyes opened. "You look terrible," were her first words, voice weak, but tinged with her characteristic dry humor. Kale, unshaven and exhausted from his vigil, managed a relieved laugh. "You don't look so great yourself." "Liar," she countered with a faint smile. "Ethereal women are always beautiful." "Can't argue with that," he admitted, helping her from the chamber as the healing medium drained away. They made their way to the observation lounge, where the vast panorama of space stretched before them. Kepler Station was visible to one side, its utilitarian structures, a stark contrast to the elegant lines of the Void Whisper. "What happens now?" Kale asked, the question that had been weighing on him since their victory. "Helios won't be the only ones hunting you once word spreads about what happened here." Arya considered this, her amber eyes reflecting the distant starlight. "We could run forever," she acknowledged. "Find some remote corner of the galaxy and disappear. But that would mean surrendering everything my people built. All our knowledge, our art, our vision of harmony between technology and life." "So not running, then," Kale concluded. "Not running," she agreed. "Building, preserving, fighting when necessary." Before Kale could respond, a priority communication alert sounded. The sender identification showed Captain Elena Vasquez of the Andorian Archaeological Institute, a respected academic organization dedicated to preserving knowledge of lost civilizations. "Accept," Arya commanded, curiosity evident in her voice. The screen illuminated to show a woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked black hair, and the intense focus common to dedicated researchers. "Void Whisper." Captain Vasquez greeted them formally. "I apologize for the intrusion, but news of your encounter with Helios Dynamics has reached certain interested parties." "And which interested party do you represent, Captain?" Arya asked carefully. "The Institute seeks only knowledge and preservation," Vasquez assured them. "We have no corporate affiliations or military agendas. In fact, we may have information of great value to you." "I'm listening," Arya said, leaning forward slightly. "Our archaeological team in the Vega system has uncovered what appears to be an intact ethereal archive," Vasquez explained, unable to completely mask her excitement. "The protective fields have prevented detailed examination, but the architectural and energy signatures are unmistakable." Kale felt Arya tense beside him. "An intact archive?" she repeated, voice barely above a whisper. "With memory crystals?" "We believe so," Vasquez confirmed. "But we cannot access it without ethereal biological markers. If you are who the rumors suggest." "I am Arya Luxon, Time Countess of the Ethereal Flotillas," Arya stated, drawing herself up despite her weakened condition. "And, yes, I can access the archives, if they are indeed what you believe them to be." "Then I propose an alliance," Vasquez offered. "Safe passage to Vega for you and your companion, full academic resources of the Institute at your disposal, and our protection against those who would exploit ethereal knowledge for destructive purposes." Arya turned to Kale, a question in her amber eyes. This was no longer just about their survival. It was about the potential rebirth of ethereal knowledge and culture. "Sounds like a better plan than mine," Kale admitted with a wry smile. "Though I reserve the right to be skeptical until we see this archive for ourselves." Arya nodded, turning back to Vasquez. "We accept your proposal, Captain. Expect our arrival within the week." After the communication ended, they stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Kale felt Arya's hand find his, their fingers intertwining. "You don't have to come," she said softly. "This isn't your fight." Kale squeezed her hand gently. "I bought a ship at auction. Turns out it came with a mission. A war against corporate vultures. And a beautiful alien woman. I'd say I got more than my 40,000 credits worth." Her laughter, still weak but genuine, warmed him more than he could express. Together, they watched as the Void Whisper systems continued their self-repair. The hull gradually regaining its original pearlescent luster as damaged sections regenerated. 5 days later, the Void Whisper departed Kepler Station, its hull reinforced with a combination of ethereal technology and human engineering, a physical manifestation of the partnership that had developed between its unlikely crew. The ship's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with renewed vitality as they approached the jump gate that would take them to the Vega system. Standing on the bridge, Kale placed a hand on Arya's shoulder. Each star out there tells a story, he said, gesturing to the vast expanse before them. We'll go as far as we need to hear them all. Arya smiled, placing her hand over his. And we will write the next chapters together. As the void. Whisper entered the jump gate. The universe seemed to hold its breath, watching as the last ethereal and her human companion embarked on a journey to recover what was lost and discover what might yet be. Not an ending, but a beginning.